Hi guys and welcome to today's video. So today I'm going to do another English revision video and I'm going to tell you how to write basically a good essay. I've got like a few hints and tips that I found in my A-level folder. So obviously some of them are aimed towards students who are on AQA because that's the board that I studied. But I'm also I found some of my old essays as well, so I thought I'd show you some of the extracts from those as well. I picked out all of the ones that were basically A grade essays. So I've got on my phone here my notes, so I'm just going to run you through basically the things that we were told to do in essays to make sure that you've got everything. So the first thing you want to do is when you get an extract is obviously read it, but you want to figure out what the subject is about. So what is the content actually about? So that's your first tip. So that's like your starting point for all of your analysis. So next you want to work out whether it's prose, poetry or a drama. So this way obviously all of them have different structures, so there's different things to talk about. So obviously in poetry you've got things like iambic pentameter and rhyming and rhythm, whereas in prose you've got paragraph structure and then also like chapter structure, whether it's linear or whether it's kind of skipping around the place. And then in drama obviously you've got who's talking and then also like the stage directions as well. So then yeah, I've got written down here as well, the next thing is structure. So obviously that is how everything is laid out, so you want to make sure that you're talking about why the author has laid it out in this way, why they've given like this character this to do, like etc, etc. So next you want to look at the language that the author is using. So this means maybe they're using semantic fields. So for example in Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare uses the semantic field of like light and dark. That's a really massive one. So you want to talk about why they're using that various like language to do that. So then for example again like the romantic poets used a lot of fantastical and like nature images, so you want to talk about why they've chosen to use those and what impact it has on the audience and what message they're trying to get across by using the language that they're using. So then you want to think about the tone and the mood of the text you're reading. So you want to talk about, is it happy or is it sad, and what is the impact on you as a reader, what are you feeling and what do you think the author intended you to feel when you were reading this, because obviously the author's got in mind what they want their reader to be thinking about and what impact they want it to have on their reader's like day. And then one of the most important ones is context. So what time was the play written and what impact did that have? So like religious impacts, equality impacts in terms of like women and gay rights and that kind of thing. And then sometimes you also want to think about why the writer wrote it. So if there's like a bigger picture, if they're trying to get across a message, maybe like a political message or a social message, think about what they were trying to do for the time they were writing in. Okay, so then the next notes I've got to share with you is basically this. I'm not sure if other exam boards mark in the same way, but for AQA your like essays marked out of 40 and it's split, so each one has 10 marks. So there's AO1, AO2, AO3 and AO4, and that's assessment objective 1, 2, 3, 4. So AO1 is the structure of your essay, so that's like how it flows, whether you've structured it well, whether it goes like, make sure that you're not jumping around all the place. So you want to link one point to the next point to the next point and so on. You don't want to like write something about this quotation and then like write about another quotation and then come back to that first quotation later on. You want to make sure that it's all very like cohesive and kind of makes sense in the structure it's in. So then AO2 is your analysis of form, structure and language. So the form is whether it's a novel, a play or poetry, and structure is how they've structured that. So for example in poetry, that's like, is it a sonnet or is it like a haiku, or have they just kind of done their own thing, and like how have they structured it? Is it A, B, A, B, or does it have a rhyming scheme? So then in plays, Again, the structure is like who's talking when, who's got the majority of the speech, are there stage directions. You want to talk about all of that in that one. And then obviously structure in novels is paragraph length, sentence length. Then if you're using it as wider reading, like is the novel linear or is it in flashbacks? Like that kind of thing you want to make sure you're talking about. So then A03 is wider reading and critics. Obviously you can't do critics in your exam because you don't know what text you're going to be given, or certainly we didn't in our exam, but you can use them and you should use them in your coursework. Whereas the wider reading, it's about everything you've read and you want to read across like the different genres and then also the different like play, poems, novels, etc. So this is how you link knowledge you already have from texts you've studied previously to the unseen text in your exam. And then A04 is context. So this is historical, social and literary context. So historical is obviously what time period was the person writing in. So for example, Shakespeare is a really good example actually, because he was living in the Elizabethan and the Jacobean era. So when he was in the Elizabethan era, his plays were a little bit more upbeat, but when he went into the Jacobean era, James was extremely paranoid about losing the throne, so there was a lot of plays written about that to please the king. And then social context is, as I said before, like what's going on in terms of religion and equality and that kind of thing, like what's going on in terms of workplaces as well, like is it the Industrial Revolution or is it after, is it before? And then literary context is basically who else is writing at the time, what are they writing, is the person that you're looking at writing in a different way, or are they kind of sticking with the themes of the time? So then I've also got on here, which you can't see, but a checklist for good essay writing. So I'm just going to read these out to you. So you've got good structure of ideas. So again, that's how you're structuring your own essay. Well thought out argument and point. So in your exam, honestly, take that 10-15 minutes to read through the text, highlight them and, you know, like write little notes about what you think it might mean, what you're going to write about before you actually go for it, and kind of decide which order you're going to analyse in and like what you're going to analyse against each other. Because obviously in my exam it was pretty much always compare and contrast the ways the two writers blah 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 blah. So you're always wanting to compare and like basically weigh the text out against each other to see who's doing what. So then make sure you're using relevant quotations and that they're explained and analysed. Don't just stick in a quote because you can. Make sure that you're picking good quotes that you know how to analyse and you know you can analyse in depth as well. Then I've got use of relevant context. So again, that is the context of the time that the writer was writing in. And then also the context of how audiences today might perceive it. You want to do different viewpoints on the text. That's really important. Then you want to make sure that you are linking to other texts in your wider reading and make sure you're pointing out whether they're similar or whether they're different. And then you want to analyse why the author is picked to write in a novel or a play or a poem. So obviously some of the context from that is that novels weren't around at the very beginning of literature. It was more poetry and drama, and then it slowly became into novels. So like our most prominent literary thing at the moment is novels. That's what most people read and write. Obviously we still have poets and there's still plays, but the majority of people lean towards the novel. You also want to make sure that you start off with an introduction. So you want to compare the two texts, so whatever the question is, and I'm going to read you out like a little bit of what I've done in a minute so you can see the kind of like introduction that I normally do. But you want to make sure you're comparing the texts, very like 2 sentences, so like 1 sentence for each text about how that text and that writer is approaching the topic of the question that you've been given. So then you want to make sure you're putting in your wider reading, and you want to be sure that you're comparing both the structure and the language of those texts to the unseen text you've been given. And then in your very last paragraph, you want to make sure that you answer the question. So you should be doing this throughout. You should probably do it like at least at the end of every paragraph. That's kind of like what you should be doing so that the examiner always knows that you've got the question in mind, but make sure that you definitely answer the question right at the very end in your conclusion paragraph. So which writer does this better? Make sure you're writing, this writer does this better in his blah 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 because blah blah blah, compared to so and so who did blah blah in their blah blah, if that makes sense. Probably didn't make sense. So then within the paragraph, so once you've picked your quotation, you want to make sure that you're doing your point. So and so shown that they are blah blah with this quotation. Don't say with this quotation though. Don't ever say with this quote or this quotation. That's not like great. Of like the point you're trying to make, the argument you're trying to make with a quotation to back it up, then you're going to analyse that quotation. So it's point, evidence, analysis, and you want to make sure that you're doing that. You should really do, our teachers taught us to do point, evidence, analysis, then like evidence analysis. So the second evidence and analysis might be your wider reading, or it might be you're going into like the subject a little bit more with a quote further on, or from the other text that you're comparing it to. So I thought that to kind of show what I would do, that I would read some of one of my A grade essays from when I was doing my A level. So this one, I'm just going to read you like the introduction and like the first paragraph, and then also I'll just go on to the conclusion as well so you can see what I wrote and like what can get an A grade. So this one is between Atonement by Ian McEwan and Othello by Shakespeare. So the question was, compare and contrast how the writers present the frustrations of romantic love within their texts. So I've written for my introduction, Ian McEwan's Atonement presents clear romantic frustration between the characters of Cecilia and Robbie, yet the two seem unaware to begin with what has caused this frustration between them. Shakespeare's Othello, on the other hand, depicts a growing frustration between husband and wife, with Desdemona unaware of what she has done wrong to create this feeling between her and her husband. So that was my introduction. So you can see it's like very short and it's just one sentence for each of the texts to answer the question to begin with, and then I'm going to go on to analyse and say why I think that. So my first paragraph of the like explanation. So I think I'll read you two paragraphs because I've got one for Atonement, then one for Othello. And then obviously it is a bit longer than that, quite a lot longer. But then I'll read you the conclusion as well. So you've got like a little bit of, to see what kind of thing I've written for a novel and a play. So my Atonement paragraph starts with, McEwan writes Atonement in a third-person narrative, but at times it appears from different people's perspectives within this narrative. This could be a reason for McEwan choosing to write his story as a novel, as there is far more flexibility in the use of different perspectives in a novel than in a play. For example, it comes from Cecilia's perspective when McEwan writes, he had a way of wrong-footing her whenever he could. This quotation demonstrates some of the frustrations within the pair's relationship. Neither Cecilia nor Robbie has yet declared their love for one another, and they appear to be in an awkward stage of discovering what their feelings are for each other. In Robbie's attempts to seem eligible for Cecilia, he ends up causing her to think otherwise. McEwan's use of the term wrong-footing implies a sense of fragility in the current state of their relationship. It is as though the relationship can be metaphorically described as a tightrope, so any wrong-footing would be detrimental to the couple. This sense of delicacy is what first introduced the frustrations of romantic love into Atonement. Another reading of this quotation is of a childlike nature. Robbie and Cecilia were friends as children, and it is often said that children purposefully annoy those that they fancy. By saying that Robbie would do something wrong by Cecilia whenever he could implies that he is trying to wrong-foot her, and so brings up these ideas of childlike flirtation. Her frustration towards Robbie's actions is supposed to arouse a feeling of love for him within her. So that's basically what I wrote for my opening paragraph with McEwan. And if you haven't read Atonement, by the way, read it, it's an amazing book. So then I go on to my next paragraph. On the other hand, the frustrations shown within Shakespeare's Othello are orchestrated to pull Desdemona and Othello apart. The frustrations within the play are solidified by Desdemona's dropping of her handkerchief as Emilia picks it up to give to Iago. What he will do with it, heaven knows, not I. Emilia is unaware of the chaos her husband will cause by having the handkerchief in his possession. As Othello is a play, the handkerchief causes dramatic irony due to the audience knowing exactly what Iago is doing in terms of the breakdown of Othello and Desdemona's marriage. In this sense, some of the frustration created by Shakespeare is formed within the audience and not the characters, as the audience will be willing Othello to find out what Iago is doing. The frustration is that no one within the play can see Iago's manipulation of a relationship that was once filled with love. At the time Shakespeare was writing and the play was first performed, marriage would have been seen as entirely sacred and religious. Iago's form of meddling makes it look to Othello as though his wife has been cheating on him, which would have been seen as a sin, creating even more frustration within the audience as they know Desdemona has not sinned against her husband in any way. Okay, so then I'm going to read you the paragraph that I've put my wider reading in as well, so you can see how I bring that in, and then I'm going to read the conclusion. Similarly, in Othello, the handkerchief is representative of Othello and Desdemona's relationship. Emilia is aware of the history of this item between the couple and knows the frustration it will cause when it goes missing. Poor lady, she'll run mad when she shall lack it. Despite this, Emilia still gives the handkerchief to her husband. Shakespeare's use of the phrase, she'll run mad, shows just how sentimental the handkerchief is to Desdemona. The handkerchief was a gift from Othello to Desdemona. Othello himself had received it from his mother and was told that it was magical and would keep her marriage faithful and happy. For this reason, when Desdemona loses the handkerchief, it implies the losing of the relationship also, as it is at this point that Othello truly starts to believe his wife has been unfaithful to him. Due to Desdemona losing the handkerchief, many frustrations arise between her and her husband as to whether she is telling the truth about her supposed infidelity. Desdemona grows frustrated at the loss of her handkerchief, as Emilia stated she would, and she also grows frustrated at not knowing what is ailing her husband. Iago uses the importance of the handkerchief to manipulate the situation to the outcome he wants. A modern example of this is in Roddy Doyle's The Woman Who Walked Into Doors, when we are told the ways in which Charlo manipulated Paula. He'd bring me a cup of tea or a flake. I'd grab at anything and I'd forget. I sometimes cry when I eat them. Paula's situation is so hopeless that when she is given the opportunity to believe her husband treats her nicely, she grabs at it. Where this differs from Othello is that the manipulation is coming from somebody within the relationship themselves and not just somebody on the outside. A reader of Doyle's novel may become frustrated that the character he has created of Paula is so willing to forget the abuse her husband puts her through daily simply for a chocolate bar. Yet this novel truly does show the frustrations of romantic love, as Paula believes her husband loves her despite the abuse simply because he occasionally buys her things. He loved me, he bought me things. The frustration comes from every time he apologises for hitting her. She believes it will be the last, and instead of removing herself from the detrimental environment she is in, she continues to love him despite everything he has done. A modern reader may also become frustrated in the fact that, despite being a modern woman, Paula is submissive to her husband. So then I'm going to read you my closing paragraph. So there I have written, overall, despite both Shakespeare and McEwan using symbolism to present romantic love, it is done in very different ways. Shakespeare's presentation arouses more frustration within the audience than perhaps it does with the characters on stage, whereas McEwan uses different methods to present sexual tension and frustration between his two characters. So I really hope this video has helped you, and if you want any more videos like this, then please let me know in the comments down below. I found my A2 coursework as well the other day, which was an A as well, so if you'd like me to go through like coursework, then I'll do that as well. Yeah, the coursework's pretty long, but if you did find me reading out some of the paragraphs from my like A-level essays helpful, then please do let me know and I'll do more of it in future, as I also have like my A grade and some of them were like more A-star grade RS papers as well that I can read out to you and kind of like take you through. I am planning on doing a video on how I analyse text as well soon. I just need to pick a text and pick a passage, and then I'm going to go through that. I think I'll do like my last video I did like my bullet journal video, and I think I'll like set it up like that so you can see the text yourselves, and I'll kind of like write and talk you through what I'm doing. So I hope you're all having a lovely day, and I will see you next time. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.